Hello everyone, welcome to this lesson. Today we're going to be covering scanning with Nmap. So in our last video we discussed a little bit about TCP versus UDP and how that was going to play in. And in today's lesson we're going to kind of see that more with Nmap scanning. So we're going to go over scanning TCP ports and UDP ports today. We'll also cover some ping sweeps and a little bit of Nmap scripting engine. So the entire lesson today is going to be in Kali Linux. So if you want to go ahead and get your Kali box ready and your terminal ready. So the first thing I'm going to quickly show you is how to do a ping sweep with Nmap. So in earlier videos we did cover how to write your own ping sweep in Bash. So we can also achieve the same thing in Nmap. So with that syntax, we can say nmap, and then we just say -sn, and then you pick the network you want to sweep. So you can do a range. You could say .1 through 254 if you want. You could say .0 WAC24 if you want. It really doesn't matter here. So if you go ahead and hit enter on that, this may take a minute. I'm going to go ahead and Alt-Tab over and just show you a result of what I scanned earlier. So if you see here, the only thing that I don't like about Nmap with the ping sweep is that sometimes it shows you that every host is up, which just is not true. At least in my instance, I have maybe 10 hosts on my network and it's picking up everything. So take the results with a grain of salt. I would recommend using other types of scanning methods, building your own ping sweeps, and really in the future ICMP packets aren't really going to be the way you're going to want to find if a host is available. You'll probably just stealth scan or SYN scan a network, which is something we're going to cover here in a little bit. But I just wanted to show you this as an option. It does work sometimes. In my instance with my network, it's not working very well. So just know that the option's there, but it's kind of iffy at times. And as you can see here now, it has pulled up kind of the same thing. So let's go ahead and get this into full screen here. So if you see that it's the same exact thing, we're going to go ahead and just clear our screen. It's showing 256 hosts up. So the first thing I want to show you before we do start scanning the TCP and UDP is the help feature of Nmap. So if you're ever confused on syntax or you want to kind of go and learn a little bit more about some of the syntax, you can come in here and look through it. So with what we go over today is really what you're going to need in the course, but you might find that there's some other scanning techniques that you might want to use throughout the course. So I know mine developed over time and I eventually used something completely different than what I started off with. So I'll go over kind of both of those today, how I started and where I ended and kind of how I got there and the logic behind it. So our first scan we're going to do here, and you can do this on any host, just pick a host in your network. So we're going to say nmap, and we're going to say VV. So that's for verbosity. The more V's you have, the more verbose it is. That just means that it's going to kind of give you updates as you go along. I like this so you can kind of see what's happening. If not, you have to sit there and kind of wait it out and you have no idea when the scan's going to finish, how much time is left, if it's found any ports. So really it's nice to just see some output. So and the next thing we're going to put in here is a capital P lowercase n, and that's just saying treat all hosts as they're online. So it's going to do a full scan on it as if it were up. Okay, and the next one we're going to do is a -a, and that is for all, is how I like to think about it. If you see here, it says it enables OS detection, version detection, script scanning, and traceroute. So it's covering ground on a lot of scans that are up here. Say -O here for OS detection. It's doing 4 and 1 for you. So I like to use -A. It's a complete scan. So We'll also do a stealth scan, SYN scan. It's a dash S, little s, capital S. So what we're doing here is we're going to use our three-way handshake to our advantage. So we talked about last time how we send a SYN packet out and we receive a SYN ACK back, and then we'll send an ACK packet back. Well, in this case with stealth scanning, what we're going to do, instead of sending an ACK packet back, we're going to send a reset back, an RST packet. So we never actually establish a connection. So what we're doing there is we're receiving a response back saying, hey, you can connect to us, but we're never actually going to establish that connection because we don't want to tip off a firewall, or we don't want to tip off any kind of intrusion detection software. So nowadays, it's not really going to work out that well as far as being stealth. Most firewalls are going to pick up on this, but it's still the go-to method of scanning that we're going to use, and that's kind of the logic behind it. So the next thing we want to add on here is a T. I like to use T4. So T is for speed, and you can use a number between 1 and 5, 1 being the slowest and 5 being the fastest. So generally, if you use 5, it's going to get done faster, but you may be detected. It's going to make a lot more noise. There's a chance that you're going to run into some issues where you don't find open ports like you should. And 1's going to be the opposite, slowest. It's going to be more complete. You're likely going to find more ports than you would with T5. I like to run on T4. I haven't had any issues with it. We're not worried about making noise in the lab. If this were the real world, maybe we wouldn't use T4, just depending on if we're doing a stealth scan or not. So here it's not a big deal, so we'll go ahead and use T4. And then the next switch is going to be for ports. So if we typed in -P right here, we can say we want to look up a specific port. We could say port 80. Or we could type in up range 1 through 1000. But I just like to do all ports. So all you do there is you do -P-, because you want to search the entire range. So if you don't put in a -P, I think it searches for, the top 1,000 common ports. And you're going to find that there's a ton of ports open that are not on the common ports. So always scan every open port. That's pretty critical. Okay, so the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to save our output. So there's a few different options. You could say output all. So that will save your output to an XML file, an Nmap file, and a greppable file. I don't really like doing it. You can. It just creates a lot of files and creates a lot of space. Me personally, I just like to do an N for Nmap file. So you're going to get the same exact output when you scan. That's going to be the same exact file, what's going in your file. So there we can just pick a folder. I'm going to pick root, and we can just call it tcp scan.txt. And then the last thing you have to do here is you pick the host that you want to scan. So let's just pick one host instead of picking a range like we did last time. So I'm going to pick 192.168.15.2. You can pick whatever host you want. And then all we have to do is hit enter. And it's going to start scanning. So the scan is going to take some time. You can see we're scanning all 65,000 ports. We're doing a SYN scan or a stealth scan. So we're going to be running scripts. We've got a lot of things going on here in the background. So what we can do is, I already have the output. We can kind of go over it. So you can see what kind of happens once the scan is finished. So if you look here, it picked up a few open ports, and you can kind of look through those and see if it found any information, if anything looks interesting. When we get into the enumeration section, we're going to kind of cover on what we do when we find open ports like this. So really, we have a little bit of information on this. I would want to Google this more. This is nothing that's going to be vulnerable. We might want to look into what this Pando pub is. You can see this port is common to Steam for in-home streaming. So I have a Microsoft TLS port here. This is actually running RDP. So it's kind of pulling a little bit of information. Here's my computer name for that computer. So, and you can kind of go through here and see if you can pull anything else. We've got an OS scan. It's going to guess on the OS a lot of the times. Sometimes you may be able to find information. So we're seeing that it's guessing Microsoft XP 7 or 2012. That's not right. It is running Windows 10. But it is giving us a scan that's pointing to Windows. So that's an indicator there that we may be able to look and see if we can find any vulnerabilities later. We know that we're not on a Linux track. So just some interesting information here. So what I want to show you as well is just the difference between, I guess, the logic here. So what we did when we scanned this machine is that we scanned all ports, and we did a deep scan. We scanned all here, right? So if we want to make this process faster, this took 1,500 seconds. So it took some time. If we want to make it a little faster, what we can do instead is we can scan just for open ports. We can do just a stealth scan on this. And what that'll lead to is we'll see open ports, but we're not going to see a lot of the detail. We're not going to see everything from the OS scan or from version detection or script scanning, any of that. We're only going to find what open ports are there. And then we can run this same scan on the open ports. So what that's going to do is we're going to very quickly be able to find what ports are open, but we're not going to waste a lot of time scanning every single port, even the ones that are closed, for all. So my suggestion is to do stage scanning, where stage 1 is a quick scan, find what ports are open, don't find any information out about them, and then go and scan them. It's going to come in very handy for you, especially on the exam. You're going to save a lot of time doing it that way. So I recommend that you kind of play with this and just kind of find your comfort zone in your scanning, especially early on. So by the time you get to the exam, you're comfortable with scanning. It's not even something you're going to worry about. I do recommend going and looking on Google and seeing what some other people have recommended in terms of scanning, especially in stage scanning. I do have some information out there. I know there's some other information, especially on forums that are out there. So feel free to kind of dig around and find that out, but also be comfortable and try to make one on your own and see how you can get it to scan at a good speed for you. So you have plenty of time in the labs to play around with that. So it's not something we're going to get into too heavy, but once again, just try to do stage scanning and look more into it if you need to. So the next thing we're going to cover now is going to be UDP scans. So our UDP scan is really going to be very similar syntax to what we're doing here with the TCP scan. So you can see right now it's running the TCP scan still, and it's got 1 hour and 50 minutes. This may speed up, but this is kind of what we're talking about. It's going to take a long time. So it's much better, much faster. You're talking maybe 10, 20 minutes on a lot of machines where you just scan the ports and then you scan more intense with the all option. So let's go ahead. I'm going to cancel this out. I just kind of want to show you the syntax I like to use, and then we'll show you another option for scanning here. So very similarly, I'm just going to tab up if it's going to let me here. So what we're going to do, instead of a stealth scan, we're going to do a UDP scan. That's all we have to change here. Everything else can hold true to the same. So this is just saying we're going to scan UDP. And since there's no three-way handshake, there's not a stealth scan there. So what we're going to do as well, instead of doing all ports, I just want to show you the top 200 or so. So we can say top ports 200. The reason being, it takes forever to scan all the ports on the UDP side. So you're really not going to need to see more than the top 1000, and we're going to get to that here in a minute. So we can change this to UDP scan. But for now, we're going to scan the top 200 ports, and same intensity, same output, everything else. We're just going to go ahead and hit enter on this. Okay, and we can see we're running a UDP scan on the top 200 here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the UDP scan here. So if we look at this UDP scan just for 200 ports took 754 seconds. That's a long time. And we found one port. So the only port we found that's open is the NetBIOS 137. So we can see that here. So I do have Samba open on that machine, so that did pull up correctly. It's going to go ahead and try to make a guess again as to what's running on that machine. Again, it's wrong. So take this with a grain of salt. Not always right, but sometimes you will find useful information in the OS scan. And then it does run some information here. It ran some scripts on the Samba, and it is finding NetBIOS. It found the computer name. It can't find the user address or the username, sorry, but it can find the MAC address. So it's finding a little bit of information here, and this could be useful. So it's just something else to add to our information gathering. So the other thing I want to show you here with UDP scanning is a different method. So this is one of the scans I was talking about, that if you kind of go out and look, you might be able to find something similar. So this is very, very similar here in syntax. We're doing the top ports of 1000. We're scanning UDP. This is just saying it wants stats every 3 minutes instead of doing verbose or verbosity here. So just a little bit of different syntax. Has max retries of 1. And you can see here the scanning speed's actually on a 3, where here it's on a 4. And when you look at it, this took 119 seconds to find port 137 open. But the difference is that we didn't have all selected. So you could technically do a stage scan here too. So if you find something interesting and you want to find more information, you can scan specifically on those ports. So what we're looking at now is, say we found this and we found port 137 here. We can run the same scan that we have. We just have to change out the ports from top ports 200. We can just say port 137. And that's going to go completely faster. I mean, you're talking about scanning one port as opposed to 200. So your 2 scans are going to be faster than 1 scan of 200 ports here. So just something to think about. And this is just another reference to stage scanning. I completely recommend it. So research that. Once again, look on the web and see what you can find. Very, very useful in the labs and especially on the exam in terms of time-saving tactics. Okay, and so the last thing I do want to cover is going to be Nmap scripting engine. So let's go ahead and cancel this scan here. So the Nmap scripting engine is a set of scripts that's provided by Nmap that can be used to find vulnerabilities. You can look for DNS zone transfers. You can do OS discovery, Samba version types. There's a ton of information you can use here or find here, and it's all legal to use on your exam. So I think it's great. If we change our directory real quick, if we go to our user folder, share, Nmap, and scripts, and we just ls in there, these are all the Nmap scripting engine scripts here. There's a ton of stuff. So my recommendation would be, if you're interested in finding something, you can look for specifics in here. You could also Google and see if there's a script, since there's so much information here. There's also a way to run all, which I'll show you here in a second. So you can just kind of see if you're looking them. If you're looking at Samba, for example, you see Samba share open and you're curious that maybe it's vulnerable, like say this MS08067 is a really popular vulnerability, or this MS17010, that's your eternal blue or your WannaCry, right? So you can kind of search, if you have a hunch, you can search for an individual script, but I prefer to search for all. So let's go ahead and kind of cover that. So let's say on our machine, we did find Samba was open, right? So maybe we want to look at port 137 that we found. And what we can say is script. So if we had a hunch, and the hunch was that the vulnerability was the Samba right here, the MS1710 or 17010, sorry, we could copy that and we can paste it down here and we can make that our script. But what we really want to do is we could just say all. It's so much easier because you're going to find more information this way. And then all you got to do is type in the IP address. So very simple, very straightforward. This is technically run when you do the all switch on the original scan, but you know, I don't find that it finds scans or finds these scripts very well. So I like to do it again on these. So something to keep in mind here, we're going to cover it a lot more when we are doing our scanning later on in our enumeration. So look to see this again in the enumeration section. I'm going to kind of challenge you to remember this, and we're going to download some boxes for vulnerabilities and kind of start scanning here in our enumeration section. So it's going to get a little more interesting, a little more fun. So keep this in mind. And you can see our scan just finished. It's really fast. And you can kind of come through here and just look and see if there's anything that's found. So we scanned one port looking for any vulnerabilities, and it's giving us some information, some pre-information here. It doesn't really look like it's found anything, which is good. So good that my computer is not really vulnerable there. But so it's just something to think about and something to use in the future. So remember this, go back through the video if you need to. Once again, you can do the Nmap help and look through that and just kind of start figuring out how you're going to scan machines, because coming up here in the next section, we are going to start scanning boxes outside of our own. So it's going to get a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting, like I said. So that's it for this lesson. I want to thank you for joining me, and until next time, I'm Heath Adams.